Let me know if you can see that. Perfect. So we'll just do some quick intros of kind of who's on the panel and then what Headway is, just so you know what lens we're reviewing the portfolios through. So hopefully that's helpful as well. And to get started, so I'm Andrew, partner, CEO, head of design here at Headway. I'm based out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. My background is I went to school for business and self-taught design. So a lot of my design experience is kind of balanced with that, trying to meet business goals with obviously user outcomes. And so I'll pass it over to Katie here. Give a quick.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katie Jesko. I'm a senior product designer here at Headway. I hail from Detroit, Michigan, so pretty close to Wisconsin. And yeah, my background started off in graphic design before moving to visual and then UI and UX and then on to product. And then I'll pass it over to my teammate, Alex.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Clary. I am a senior product designer here as well at Headway. I am from Buffalo, New York. And my background actually kind of similar to Andrew, where I started actually a business. I have a degree in sports management, so it's a business degree in sports, and then self-taught design throughout the years and just kind of grown to where I'm at today.
Yeah, thanks, Katie and Alex. So we'll just talk really briefly about Headway, as I mentioned. So at Headway, we launch and grow products, new digital products with less risk. That means we rapidly iterate with customers, we validate opportunities, we bring new products to market with business strategy, design, and development. And so we work with kind of both ends of the spectrum. A lot of companies that are, solo founders or a group of founders that maybe you've just raised a seed round, all the way to corporate innovation teams, helping them spin out new ideas and new products to their customers. And we work with customers across, multiple phases. So the idea phase, where you have a problem, something that isn't really well defined, but you want to solve it, or an idea for a solution, finding a market, finding the customers that have that problem, seeing if you can build a business around it, and then going into the build phase, where you're trying to build MVPs more or less, where you can learn from your customers, stay really close, and sell early on prototypes and proof of concepts to kind of prove out some of the engagement. And then from there, growing your product. So once you have a product in the wild that people can use, it's all about turning the right knobs on the experience and understanding how you create more value. And then we work with companies to transform kind of old manual processes into digital experiences that are more on demand for their customers. And then just to give you some more context around the type of work we do, we work in healthcare and fitness. We do a lot of work in financial technology, logistics, supply chain, and social and communication. And then our team, this was our last team retreat. Unfortunately, actually, Alex and Katie are not in this photo because they both couldn't make it for different reasons. But this was in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And all that is to say, we're a remote company. So we have about 50 to 60% of our team is in Green Bay area, and the rest of our team is throughout the United States, as you can see by Alex and Katie's locations as well. So we are distributed, and yeah, excited to be here. I'll talk really briefly about what we look for, and then we'll get started. So when we look at design, we have kind of this rubric that we think about design at, and we'll just kind of go around the horn. Interaction design, prototyping, user experience and research, design thinking. There's a lot of overlap in between some of these, in addition to like collaboration and communication, design leadership, business and product, and then visual design and front-end engineering. Obviously, every designer doesn't need this, and I would say on our team we have different levels of this throughout, and I think that's good. It gives us more opportunities to learn together and grow. And I also think it really depends on the how senior the position is that you're looking for, and what else comes with the product teams that you're on. I think for us, a lot of times we are used to being the either solo or duo designers on project teams, because we are playing kind of a product team role for a lot of our clients, where we're not necessarily working with their teams. I would say on the small end of the spectrum for designers or for startups, where we are their product team. We have to wear a lot of hats, and we have to work with product, and we have to work with engineering, and it's a really fast paced environment where having a lot of knowledge in all of these areas helps you to move quick, helps you understand, you know, what happens before things get to you from product and what happens downstream from you as things get to engineering. That's a lot of what this model is kind of framed around. And then as you get to the larger end of the spectrum, you get more into, you know, collaborating and communicating with larger teams, getting buy-in from the business and product, and being able to really sell the value of design and the value of product, and kind of take those insights into action, and then be able to grow those beyond. And I'm sure if there's any questions more about this, happy to answer at the end of this, but just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what do we do at Headway, what types of companies do we look for, what do we look for in designers to join our team. So without further ado, we will get started. I will pull up the first one here. So let me. Alex, do you wanna kick us off here with Jay's?
Yeah, we want to. So let me take a look at that. So let's see here. So looking at this right now, there's a couple things that I see. It's you know, right at the top. I do like how he, you know, lets us know how many years experience that he has. It's nice that he has the most recent projects right there so you can grab them. Sometimes I've seen it where on portfolios, a lot of times they'll do some other stuff and then they'll get to eventually the actual projects that they worked on. And sometimes it's really nice to quickly just be able to look at it and see it and be able to select the three. Looking at this, it seems like there's a lot of like financial history, like as far as working in the financial industry, as far as the strengths that they've had in the past. The one, let's see here. I'm just reading some more stuff. Let's see here. Participant user experience.
Just
Go ahead.
to jump in too, just kind of like looking at this, I definitely love that there seems to be like the projects, but there's also some context around the projects, like these little snippets of information below the projects. So that's really helpful just to kind of read currently and kind of situate, you know, what this kind of Reimagine Rewards is, how it's around user research activities, you know, the mobile bill pay 2.0, how you kind of led a design direction, and really kind of recognize and what you redesigned around with the mobile app experience. So that context, I think, is really helpful to help situate at times, especially when you're just kind of previewing before kind of leading into a project itself. So that's really helpful, I'd say.
Yeah. And I want to add too, like when I look at it looks like you really wanted us to focus on the mobile bill pay. Maybe that was one of your top, you know, projects you did, because like highlighting and changing the context of the color of that link itself, where that's blue compared to the other two where they're just there. And that's all maybe just because that's blue. But yeah, I like how you just highlight that as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, and this is Jay Frater, actually from Neenah, Wisconsin, you know, due to the proprietary work of the company he worked for, he's unable to share a lot of UX and design work online. So I think that makes sense. I think, you know, a lot of it is then showing the process you used to get there and some of the thinking behind it. I don't know if this is part of any of those projects that you mentioned. You know, you couldn't share too much more of this, but I think just echoing what Alex and Katie said, you know, this is pretty helpful. I would say, you know, if you're more on the UX side of it, I would say having more insights and stuff up front on here. If you're focusing on more of a visual design, you know, project, or maybe a full stack, that's not even really a term, a product designer that kind of is wearing multiple hats, you know, like you might find a Headway, I would probably put more of the finished product here that really gets people excited. Hey, I look at it now, I want to dive in more and really figure out, hey, the end result was great, but what process did you use to get there? You know, what did the team look like that you were on? And I think those are a lot of the questions that, you know, we kind of end up asking of like, hey, tell us about the environment, because a lot of people can be really skilled in design or UX or research, but then maybe struggle when it comes to working collaboratively with a smaller team, you know, together day to day. And so I think understanding more of what the environment looks like is really helpful. Of, you know, I think this roles held really gives us a better idea of, you know, how your leadership has been and on some projects, and then you know, that you've been an individual contributor on some other projects. So
yeah, oh,
Nope, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I definitely have to agree with you, Andrew. I think it's good that you show kind of even the mobile bill pay 2.0, you show a little bit more process. But I'd even like to see a little bit more of your process in terms of even on that one. And I know you might be like limited again to what you're able to show online. So even potentially if you have like another project showing potentially at least 2 projects with a little bit more just process, you know, as Andrew said, your role, you know, what the team looks like, and then really getting into that process just again about like, you know, the mission, the services, the outcome, or even the impact, or even like even these 2 with the reimagined rewards and the Zell, even if you're able to add like a little snippet of context in there around like any kind of outcomes or impacts that you can publicly share, that would always be extremely helpful, even just seeing how, you know, what you're able to do, but the impact it made.
I think maybe what other folks have said about the project as well. So the people that you worked with, trying to get some snippets from them on the experience of working with you if you were a contractor, for example. But I think overall, yeah, I think obviously being able to show more work is always better. Perhaps, you know, there's some password protected stuff that you could share, or things that you could, you know, present, you know, to a closed audience. Let's say if you were in interviews or something, I think that would be helpful, being able to disclose that. Good, so we'll move on to the next one here. We have Ray, based out of San Jose, California. So his goal is to showcase a clear and concise but well communicated process to potential employers looking for honest, critical feedback on whether the process is well communicated or not.
Yeah, just to kind of kick us off, you know, I really kind of like the intro up here that kind of introduces you and tells you that you're a product designer and human researcher and kind of what you're seeking like a full-time role. I think that's really helpful. But one thing I would just keep in mind too, maybe if there's a possible way, like again, this is kind of a fun, unique structure that I really kind of enjoy. But if there's maybe you know, some way to kind of move those major projects up so there wouldn't be so much scrolling. I know one thing I like to think about is, you know, when I'm looking at projects, I start to think about what I want to click on first, you know, without having to do a lot of scrolling or what's in the left-hand corner. So just thinking about, you know, organization in detail, but it's still very valuable that you're actually kind of introducing yourself and kind of defining yourself up front. That's helpful.
Yeah, and the one thing too, I was wondering too when I actually did look at Reins a little too beforehand, it was nice to take a peek at some of them. That when it says major projects, trying to understand like what does that mean? What's the difference between like a regular project or a major project? Is it your role that you played? Like you had more of an impact on the role that you played within the project. Just trying to have some understanding a little bit about that too, before even going to the projects, knowing what, you know, why is this considered major compared to depending on what else is down below.
Yeah, I think you had, scroll major projects. So 2 weeks, is that, you know, the amount of time that you spent on it, I'm assuming, you know, along with some of the design challenges and things here. But diving in, I think we're looking for some more feedback around just how this was laid out from a process standpoint.
Yeah, and this is really helpful too, that again, you're kind of going with what you set off kind of the main page of, again, when you're getting into this project, you know, you're explaining your role. I'd love to even like potentially see like, you know, if there was like a variances in these roles, like if you spent most of the time prototyping or most of the time, you know, researching or what that kind of looks like. So you could even do like some sort of like scale indicator per se. But I love that, you know, you give that kind of summary up front, and even the kind of research that you show here. It's very helpful, you know, talking about that initial client meeting, and then having these bullet point lists, really understanding like, you know, what you're actually going after and what you were getting for. That's really helpful to communicate, as well as the project goals.
Yeah, I think this tells a good story about your involvement and how the project went. It'd be good to understand a little bit more about, you know, who is driving that process. I'm assuming you, since you were doing quite a bit.
Yeah, the one thing too,
this is helpful.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, if you scrolled up real quick too, Andrew, I was wondering about, in the beginning, you were given some tasks in the beginning, initial client meeting. It says like I was given these things, the must-haves, right? Maybe talk about, why those were the must-haves, right? Create a list, add items to list, set reminders to buy items. Like, why was that given to you, or how did you, I know that was maybe initially given, but sometimes as I'll say, even at Headway, like we're given like, hey, we want this to accomplish this. Well, why? Understanding the why those are important and why that was given to you. So maybe gives us some context of like understanding, like when you're given like, hey, as a person like here at Headway, like we have clients and say, hey, we want to accomplish this. Well, why is that, right? Understanding the why and explaining why, almost validating those reasons why that the person initially gave you. I think would be good understanding too. That'd be helpful as well. Like understand like what you did with that information and how that helped you furthermore and everything.
Yeah, I think just building upon that, showing some more of the artifacts kind of out of these research methods would be helpful, like visualizing the user journey and, how did you think about competitive analysis? Was it a feature comparison or was it, you had some features in here, but like showing that I think could be helpful. And for us, just a Headway would give us an understanding of how well you understand that and how well you're executing it, even if it is kind of dummied down a little bit just to show well on here. Oh, here is the user journey map. So perfect. Yeah, so I think, perhaps, linking these sections down to the bottom, I think would be helpful just to kind of show, or, having this icon, smaller or something might be good to just to give you the sense that there's more. Obviously, you can continue scrolling, but.
Yeah, and these visuals are really great. They're very, straightforward. And, I like how you're going through, as Andrew said, like you're telling a story, you're dividing it by, different kind of sections. You're taking us through, you're saying, here's our, customer journey, here's our sketches, here's kind of these, prototypes, just thinking about these different views, even as I'm looking down through here, like that's valuable to see. I know that's one thing I tend to look for, is just thinking about, not just a view, but thinking about those small views in between, what happens when you click this. And even this prototype is actually helpful for what I'm talking about, those real life views, what happens when you click through that flow. Even though it's the same kind of, overall structure, just seeing that interaction between screen and what that user is going to try to accomplish. So I think that's really helpful. And then even to just, again, I know you showed some sketches and you showed these kind of processes, but, I think I'd love to even just see more kind of like either sketches in between of how you got to there, or like these final kind of views, I think could even just help support you better and just kind of getting that across. But overall, that was really done really well.
The one thing too that I noticed on the other projects we were showing, he also mentioned why he chose with one option compared to another. Like there was two options at the beginning, and they explained why option 2 compared to option 1, I think, was the reason why he went forward with that design, which I thought was really useful. As well, scroll down a little bit. Keep going, right here. So yeah, the design trade-off, right? Like you explained why you went with something option, one option compared to the other. I thought that was really useful too, to kind of understand a little bit how you think through making decisions on some, if there's option 1 or option 2, what your decision is and how you came to that conclusion. I thought was really good.
Yeah, I think overall pretty well done. It might, I think a lot of these seem to be longer, so maybe a TLDR version up front might be helpful. Just a quick summary of the problem, solution, and outcome. But yeah, overall, I think really good. So let's pull up the next one we have here is Tina's. So the goal is to, show product and UX design, but also previous experience in research and human-centered design. So feedback, how the diversity of projects presented in her portfolio is perceived. Which bucket does she fit in? Perceived portfolio, UX, research, or product design? What skills are hiring managers looking for from product designers that maybe she isn't portraying well? As you can see here, there's a little project composition. So I think that's helpful, kind of a bar chart of what your role was on those projects.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. Just kind of, again, that before diving into, each product or project and seeing that kind of more detailed view and having to read and kind of getting that feel. I really like that kind of data visualization aspect of that to kind of highlight, and then you're able to kind of go into a project depending on what you're kind of maybe sorting out and looking for, whether if you're looking for more UI feature design or if you're looking for more of a research heavy design. So I think that's really actually helpful to highlight that feature, and really that comes across very well.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to mention too is maybe a question, and that would maybe as a person recruiting, like understanding the difference between when it says UX, UI, and design. Is it like print design, or is it some other form of design? Because UI is really a form of design for digital. Like just maybe just a little understanding. I think that might throw me off a little bit. Like to me, is the UI UX more UX focused and research focused based on that, or like was design not a part of this? So like if it says design or it says UX UI, did you do any design on it? Like how does that? So just like right off the bat too, it's a great, awesome way to show what you've done in that, but also sometimes it still leaves a little bit of answers, the questions for me, I at least would say when I first look at it.
Yeah, I think the first sample you have here is eye-catching. I think, it's presented in a good way where you see more than one screen, I think, which is helpful, which can pique your interest because, let's say if you had a sign-in screen, that's maybe we're desensitized as designers, everything has a sign-in screen. So I think it's helpful that you, kind of show more, in that one view. Yeah, duration,
I like this.
role. Yeah, this is really good.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I definitely agree. I think this is helpful to just get a broad overview up front and then to guide you down. It's telling a really good story. And just, yeah, I think this is good to help guide you through your process. You're showing, your personas, you're showing your insights you found and what that means in terms of functionality. Going through, you're showing your entire process, which is extremely helpful. That detail is really what matters. So, those wireframes, the user flows, really getting into that kind of like granular detail that's actually really helpful in just showing that process that, it's not just from a visual standpoint, but you're really able to it's easily to come across what you're trying to do here with, what your role was, and then even the outcome of the project.
Yeah, I think one of your questions in feedback you were looking for was, how is it perceived? I mean, I would say, just seeing the depth of your work perceived as a, well-rounded product designer with your experience in research and, print, but then obviously, UX, UI, where you're kind of, it doesn't really matter the medium, you're applying some of the same design principles and theories to it. So that's how I would perceive it. I would say, hey, let's have a conversation. We'd probably dive into more of the product work, but then understanding, that you have more capabilities beyond that, which I think is super helpful just to know more about the life cycle of businesses and assets they need and all of that.
Definitely. And Andrew, would you mind clicking on the third project,
This one?
We design? Yeah, I'd just like to just kind of view this a little bit more in detail. It just seemed kind of interesting from the photo. Because I know this photo kind of stood out just thinking about, kind of relating back to your data visualization for the project, but then also why that photo was so different. So just kind of was wondering like, why this is more of a photo versus more of like an app. And again, I can obviously see that's from the different kind of medium and the media itself that what you're kind of designing around. And I think that's really important too, that, you're a versatile designer. You're able not to just do, I guess you could say, the classic app or the classic website, but you're able to kind of take your research and you're able to take that design and really expand on it and integrate it in different kind of lanes and different kind of medias throughout, while still understanding who the user is and what your kind of goal is and what that situation is with design. So I think that's really helpful. And then I'd even say, like, even within projects like this that don't have like an app or website, just kind of like any highlighting, again, like any features, like any kind of outcomes, any kind of impacts at the end. Like, I'd love to know more of what happened after you kind of left this opportunity and like what kind of evolved and came out of this. That would be great to know.
Yeah, I think overall, really well done, Tina.
Yeah.
We have Kamal from Berlin, Germany. So goals to impress the hiring manager and lead a conversation, and then feedback. He's looking for just honest, real feedback. why he should be hired, what are the good vibes seen in his portfolio. Yeah, so I guess starting off, you know, a little bit more of a human element on, you know, who you are. I'm assuming that's you, you know, behind the photo there. And then, yeah, getting right into the project work.
And I'm not sure how you have your projects ordered, but I know just a helpful hint for me, just kind of, again, as I read and scroll down, I usually try to recommend that your best or most proudest work that you're proud of project is kind of stacked in terms of left to right and then keeps going down. I know that's kind of the way I start to look at projects as some of the first, so that might be an important thing. You might have that now, I'm not sure, but that's definitely something I definitely would recommend, or just kind of personal preference.
Yeah, I like to see, like, it's a lot of, I was gonna say, a lot of different types of work, right? There's AR, there's this, so it shows, you know, your depth of also kind of the same thing, different types of projects you worked on, which is really interesting as well. But
and yeah, this is really actually cool too. Sorry, Andrew, can you scroll up real quick? I like the, oh, and then right below executive.
Sorry.
The role, you're okay. The role in the team. I know, you know, I've seen sometimes either the, you know, your roles kind of like roles are mentioned or teams might be briefly mentioned or not mentioned at all. But I actually think that this is actually really valuable, that you're kind of going in and you're giving more context and more description about your role. And then you're also not just saying, you know, I was on a team or what this team was, but you're giving more context in terms of who was on the team, how many people on the team, and what their roles were too. So that's definitely able to paint a really good picture to understand, you know, what kind of team you were working in and how you guys were working together.
this is really good, showing like the process up front with the key findings. I think that's really, really good too. Again, just talking through how you identify, you know, the process, and then you're identifying some things from that process.
Mm-hmm.
That's great too with the goals. I think that's really great. Just explaining the goals. Yeah, this is good stuff.
Yeah, so it'd be good to understand a little bit about, you know, I see UXD, I'm assuming, you know, you focus a lot more on the user experience. But it'd be good to understand if you had any, you know, if you were looking for a user experience role, or if you had any visual, you know, more visual design. Looks like kind of from all your projects, a lot of it is user experience and design thinking.
Yeah, and even just to add to that, because of the kind of user experience, you know, that you kind of focus in, one important thing you could do for each project could just be to highlight a couple features. You know, this app's going to be doing this website's going to be doing this because of this reason, and what that kind of context is. That's always helpful too, like from a user experience standpoint of design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like how you're highlighting certain features, recommendations, kind of showing your heuristic evaluation and, you know, internal audit. Yeah, I think overall super helpful to just to understand. I think in the current world, it'd be good. I guess one recommendation might be to kind of feature, maybe I'm trying to think the right way to say it. Yeah, never mind. But I think overall really good for the a UX portfolio. You know, good to see your experience and you know, process that you followed. A lot of the artifacts that you created out of that was helpful.
Yeah.
I guess one thing for each of these projects might be to, you know, since you are more UX focused and more leaning on the product side, having maybe some of the goals and outcomes, you know, highlighted in here that might entice me to click into any one of them. That might, you know, I might not, this view might not catch my eye, but if you had, you know, 500 interviews plus X amount of insights like generated, that might be helpful just to summarize. All right. Thanks, Kamal. We'll move on to Aaron Twang. Oh, not Aaron Twang. Aaron Wang. Sorry, he had a T in his email, from New York. So his goal is to get hired and share work with hiring managers, recruiters, and peers, looking to make it more unique in terms of content and relate to viewers. So we were chatting about this actually a little bit earlier today as we teed up some of the portfolios, and you can see, this is based on Notion, which is good. It's kind of neat. It'd be good to see more, as a product designer, maybe see more of your work. I guess it is pretty close here, selected work. But like, even if it's just one image to kind of summarize a lot of your experience, I think that would be helpful. And then have this be, this is more specific to a project, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, the one thing too that I've seen, which is really interesting, is more of a trend now that people are, and this will be discussed too, like Andrew was mentioning, going to Notion. And I laugh because I said, as a designer, you're always, at least for me, it always feels like every year or every 2 years, I'm still trying to redesign my portfolio, right? Update work. But, Notion's a great way where you can link out to other files and bring that stuff in. And at the same time, like, you have the ability to quickly write down, what you worked on, and you don't lose your spot. You have to go through thinking like, oh, look at the whole flow. It's pretty great that you can just quickly add these things. And I think it's really great. But yeah, the simplifying what to wear was something that I really, when I took a look at that one too, like that project, that was really good. I'm gonna click on it.
Which one?
That one, the first simplifying what to wear. Yeah, so the one thing that I really liked right in the beginning here, it says what to wear, right, was the question. And I think that's great that right in the beginning you've highlighted the question and the concern, that, you can think as a human being, like, I think about this too. I can think about my wife is just a great every day, like, what do I want to wear, right? And it's a common question, but I think it's great how you position that right in the beginning to say, hey, this is what we're trying to, ask ourselves and solve for right away without even saying, oh, this is what I'm solving for. It's just like kind of putting out that statement that everybody goes through.
The table of contents is super helpful.
Yeah. It links right to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought this was another great piece. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
No, you're okay. Even showing again, I can see how you're building your process. You're telling that story again, going back to, the question you asked initially and how you're connecting and how you're thinking about that user. And I think that's really, helpful. You're showing your process. Even in terms of this is really, you've got like some really good visuals going on here. I noticed when we first landed on your portfolio on the main screen, you can stay here, that's okay.
Sorry.
No worries. I know you kind of shared more like soft skill aspects about like running design sprints and like facilitating remote collaboration through these projects, I'm assuming. So I'd love to even like have like those kind of woven in between, like, your process and your mission and the project of each of those is like, just like, all right, so for this project, we did this design sprint, like I ran it, this is how I ran it, like just kind of like showing more about that process, but more of those like soft skills I think is really valuable, in showing how you can like really put, your professional skills on that, where you can really help and come in. I think that can help you kind of start to focus, and you can see too, people who are reviewing your portfolio can see how they can, potentially add you to their team and where they can add you and how they can really utilize you, especially if you have a lot of experience in that.
Yeah, I think one thing that is kind of standard in marketing sites, if you're trying to market yourself, is just using some company logos. I think, leaning more on just the recognition of Groupon, maybe some other clients that might be more notable that might catch the attention. Not saying that's everything, because it's definitely not. There's a lot of great work you can do for small companies as well.
And then Andrew, would you mind just clicking back in the what to wear and then just kind of scroll down? I'd just love to see the rest of the project really quick to see if there was any kind of outcomes or high fidelity prototypes of anything. Yeah, again, it's just kind of what kind of Alex said. I really like the highlights of your research and highlighting them with colors, thinking about, the yellow is research, the red, the blue. So you're able to kind of go back to that and have those kind of understanding of where you were and what kind of category that fell under. Is helpful.
Yeah, embedding Figma. That's good to see those personas in there.
But yeah, the overlaying your personas is really great.
One question I had was more about I guess more tactical, how you executed the Kano analysis, and like how big was the sampling size? Just kind of knowing that, hey, this was the output, and some threshold attributes that you had, and then being able to just see what how comprehensive was that study. I think overall really good, shows your understanding and how you executed. And I think it was really good to talk through in a job interview or first touch, like, hey, this project was really interesting, let's chat through some more details of it. I think it really helps guide that story versus if, for example, you just had the screens that you designed. It'd be hard to ask enough questions about the project to understand more about your experience. So I think it was helpful. Oh, sorry, I had to move a couple windows around here. All right. Let's take a look. Our next one is Olga Tikhanova from Moscow. So our goal is to land a job and looking for feedback to increase your chances of getting a job. So first kind of impressions, nice and simple and clean, straightforward. You can predictive layout where you can kind of see, a lot of the patterns.
Yeah, I really like that you're kind of, introducing yourself. Then you're able to see some projects, having some main projects. And then below those two projects, sorry, Andrew, do you mind just scrolling down really quick? It looks like you kind of have a break, or you kind of, those are your main two projects, but I like how this, you just kind of go like an overview, like what your process is, like talking about, your research, your branding, wireframes, design tools you use, kind of, where your skills lie, what you have experience in, anything like that. I think that's really helpful. Like, and you can even bring those out and potentially, and I don't know if you do this in your current projects that we'll see here in a second, but just having those kind of brought in throughout the rest of the project, if you haven't, like that would be really helpful.
Yeah, let's dive into a project.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I'd love to just click on the view prototype. That's interesting. So I actually really like that you kind of have a link out to like a full-fledged prototype. I don't think I've ever seen that really, or seen that too many times before. More just kind of less interactive or smaller prototypes. So I think this is like really valuable. So people can kind of go in and see the actual project, can see how the flows of certain various instances. You're able to see the kind of the information architecture and how that's laid out. So I think that's really helpful. And then I would just suggest, if you don't already have it in here, just kind of maybe still showing those views if someone doesn't want to kind of link out to that external prototype. But it's really a unique situation. I like that.
Yeah.
And also too, I think a lot of your information kind of here as you're going through your process is valuable. And I see here you start to kind of have some more visuals and artifacts. So that was just going to comment on that. Just kind of any more kind of visuals or artifacts you have, or even if you have a lot of context and information, just kind of even trying to pull things out, whether it's a paragraph and you highlight a quote, or you make it a bigger kind of size of that font, just kind of doing anything to help kind of flow and tell that story visually as you're going down through the project.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and I haven't clicked through all of these, but just seeing, you're giving a summary and then being able to link out to the actual, artifacts that you created in the actual docs, I think is helpful, just to see some of those end outputs, which you don't always get to.
Wow, that's really nice.
Good.
This is really good. Like how you're going through the logo, everything. Yeah, this is really great.
Oh, I even like at the bottom too, kind of the lessons learned. That was interesting. Just kind of, yeah, no worries. It was at the bottom of like just kind of thinking again, what kind of what the outcomes were, what like the impact. And I even enjoyed the whole kind of around with more time. It definitely shows that, that's what happens in the real world. You might not get to do everything. You might not get to do, you might have a cutoff date, anything like that. So I think that's really helpful that you're able to kind of see what you learned, what you might do differently. That's actually very understandable and helps to see how you are a designer and how you can think of what to do in a different kind of scenario. And then also what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to mention this too, because there was some feedback we had. Hey, what are other people saying about this? If you can add their companies too, or, potentially clients as well, that's super helpful. But overall, good stuff. So the next one, Rosana Louis from Seattle. So I think again, telling us what you are. I'm a product designer that enjoys creating meaningful, user-centric digital experiences, and then going right into the work I think is helpful.
I actually really enjoy, I mean, this might just be a personal preference, but I do actually enjoy how it's pretty minimalistic. Again, it seems like a lot of the visuals is really just focused on the individual products themselves, and it really pulls you in, and makes you kind of want to click on those and explore more versus maybe getting kind of hung up on something else. But I think that's really helpful, just to bring the user right into your work, and letting them really get to know you as a designer, through going through your work itself, and letting them explore your process, letting them explore what they can, and really letting your work talk for you.
Yeah, Andrew mentioned this before, as far as I know, some other portfolios reviewed, but right away, like that problem and solution, like letting them know right ahead, right away, everything right up front is a nice way, especially for like people who are recruiting. You go through so many portfolios and resumes. It's easier just to be able to quickly see it, understand the problem, the solution, and then scan through some stuff to look. I think that's really great. That's a definitely big point there.
Yeah, it's extremely helpful. Just kind of go off what Alex said. It's just extremely helpful to, again, understand your process, understand that problem, and really kind of understanding, again, what challenges you solved for and how you approach them, and then what design kind of came out of that for an answer and a solution.
Yeah, I like how you have a summary too, like some of the results and the data behind the results. Even above it too, if you scroll up a little bit, Andrew, you highlighted like the summary and like keep going up a little bit. So like, yeah, I keep going right here. Like, so like 12 semi-structured interviews, you kind of laid out the two, like how many survey responses you had. So it just shows like, hey, I got like 5 responses in a survey, and that's what I based my findings off of. Like, you really went and showed like the depth of the amount of feedback that you received, which is really good.
Yeah, the only more tactical thing I would say is just having more, I guess, less width as an affordance for just kind of character limit on some of this stuff, make it a little bit more readable. But that's kind of, nitpicking on some stuff. But I think overall, yeah, good to see your process and where it's at. So sorry, I didn't read this in the beginning, but working on transitioning from research designer to product designer. So looking to improve storytelling and areas of improvement and be more of a competitive product designer.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure kind of I'd like to see this one, but definitely, again, kind of you have these different kind of, it seems like you have a lot of web and application projects. So just again, I think it'd be helpful, like with each individual project, just to kind of think again of like highlighting 1 or 2 features. This is meant for this kind of reason. We decided to go with a website or an app, or universal both because of this reason. I think could be helpful, and just because to kind of like go through as you're going through your projects, just because they're so kind of web heavy.
I think one thing as you think about moving from research more to product design is just if you are using design systems or like design libraries inside of Figma, just highlighting that a little bit more. I know that's something that we look for since we work so heavily on them. It's not a disqualifier by any means, especially if you're using, it looks like you're using Figma, or if you're using other tools, like it's easy to learn, if you have experience with them. But I think just highlighting more of the tactical details, if you're looking to, make that transition, I think you've done a really good job on the research side to display, and obviously from a visual standpoint, but then just how the dots connect through, if there's a design library supporting this in Figma, it'd be helpful just to see some of those components and maybe how you've structured some of those.
And also just to add to it, I really like your visual, like in terms of visual and UI work. It's very compelling. It's very kind of detail oriented, and I think that's really important. And one thing I just love to see, I know in the kind of view we were looking at, you had kind of like a patient profile or how that messaging happens in terms of this outreach project. I think it'd be great too to potentially add towards the bottom, like either like a flow of visual UI high fidelity screens or a prototype that you can click around. I think that can help, again, convey what that outcome was through flow, what a user would experience.
Alex, do you have any other feedback for Rosana here?
Yeah, I actually liked how this project had a lot more like the actual UI of the places. And like you talked about, you're moving from user researcher to product designer. I think that's a big thing too, as a product designer, having still that visual cue, because research is great to have those, UX flows, user flows, and understanding of that. But like as a product designer, UI does play a big part of it, right? So you have to be balanced in all these different areas, and showing more of these heavier side of like brand pieces and the UI of it, I think is a great switch. Even from the previous project, you had some, but this is like a little bit more in depth. It seems that this process or this project, maybe you had more impact on the actual UI compared to the other one. It was a little less. This one has a lot more behind that, so I thought that was really good too.
Yeah, I think being able to show the evolution of the visuals over time, just like you kind of show your learnings over time with some of those product experiences would be helpful too. You showed kind of wireframes and what the end state was. It'd be good to understand, how you approach iteration,
Yeah.
mood boarding, that sort of stuff. Looks like you've got potentially some of that here.
Yeah, that's a big thing too, especially with design in general, product design. Like Katie can contest it. Like we're on a project together, and the iterations you've done over time from learnings and testing and going back and forth. I think that's something that's a real good thing to show, because it shows you like your process and you're in a real world environment or working for them. Like you understand like, hey, iterations are over and over and over again, and you just have to make changes based on, and there's reasons why behind it, right? And kind of show that behind that and talk about that.
Yeah, and just to add, that's a really good point, Alex, because just to kind of point those out, even if like the iterations or the screens or the visuals, they seem very similar, just those little nuances and the understanding of like what the kind of iterations were about and change with the user goals, I think could be really helpful to kind of bring that research information out.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on here to Yeonwoo, based out of New York City. So her goal is to deliver information effectively with a clear layout, elegant style, and then looking for feedback. Not sure if I give too much text, which makes scanning for important information not so easy. So I think overall, so far, I mean, it's pretty succinct, pretty straightforward. Good job of kind of hierarchy and grouping of data that's together.
Yeah, I actually really like, I was gonna say little icons within each project. Again, kind of a highlight of, this seemed like a mobile app. The next one seems like, there's a desktop and a mobile version, which I think is really helpful. And then I know like the next section below these, I'm not really sure what these icons are, or if these are just more like kind of your fun personal projects, but just like those icons, like they just kind of get confusing a little bit. So maybe even like having some kind of a better icon or more explanation of what this kind of experiment for fun means, just to kind of understand that a little bit better, I think could be helpful. So it's actually
The one thing.
Oh, you're
sorry,
good.
Katie, go ahead. No, I was gonna say the one thing I really do like is I think you add a little personality to the top, which is really cool. It says I'm a bathroom singer who designs. I thought that was really cool. I mean, I like to see sometimes your personality come out to know who you're going to be working with or even talking with, and having small things like that. It's a great, jumping off person, especially like the introduction stage, like, just like, hey, so you're a bathroom singer. What is that? I don't know. It's just cool to give you some insight into personality there.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's diving into just that first case study. I think this is helpful. Overview, tools that you use, scope of work.
Yeah, I definitely like that kind of overview, tool, scope of work. Again, just understanding again if what your role was, anybody on the team, what kind of, just a little bit more information for context is always helpful.
There was a question that came through from Alicia on the Q&A. Just wanted to answer it quick. How often do y'all check portfolios on mobile? I know typically we want to optimize for mobile, but it's a little hard when working with larger visuals like a wireframe flow or information architecture map. So I was curious about your take on it. I would say for me, and I don't know if Alex and Katie have a different view on it, but it's much, I don't know, it's like way down the list for me. I think the content is kind of king, and understanding your process and seeing that is more helpful. I would say it's very rare that I would say, wonder how this looks on mobile, unless it's you're a designer, front-end engineer that's highlighting like some GraphQL, some HTML5 canvas, like different WebGL stuff that you're going to show, showing a lot of interactions and a lot of like moving things just out of interest, really. But I don't know if Alex or Katie, you had any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have one. I know for me, I tend to usually design responsively as mostly everyone does, but I know for me, I usually try to view them on desktop or get more depth on desktop, which is easier to see, a level of visuals and even content's really not a problem. But that's one thing I tend to just recommend to think about when you're building your portfolio. And this is just, to anyone, just make sure it's not only responsive, but thinking about even like showing like things around your process, whether it's smaller, like little wireframes or like small little snippets of like content, maybe like in a journey map, just thinking about it might be, easily legible on desktop view, but thinking if someone is potentially looking at a mobile view, how does that translate? So just being able to kind of think about and switch back and forth between those depending on what kind of visual you're showing.
Yeah, and I would second that too. Like in the past, so like if I like somebody's portfolio, I think they're considering worth it kind of investigating more on, I will go up to my phone and search, because again, yes, it's great to easily show this here, but like how do you think through like the flow, or like even like if something was like you'd say, okay, it can't be scaled down to mobile. Why? What was the decision behind, or like what piece did you remove from desktop or mobile, or if you did something like that, just so I can see like if there was a reason why behind like, oh, this thing was so huge, it didn't make sense to, or is it like as a designer, like how did you think of that problem, like what you're trying to show there as a solution, but how did you think through that problem also for mobile, right? So that's another thing too. I always, when I do look at it that way, I think of like, how do they solve for the same thing? Maybe it's just even a small design thing. How do they solve for that on the different screen sizes? So it's not first thing, but I'd say secondary if I want to go forward with somebody who I really like their portfolio.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I guess just kind of reiterating, portfolio doesn't matter as much to me. I know like not everyone's a front-end engineer. Like some people try to build their own site, which I commend. But like I might go to this if this is a live project and test out mobile on that. You know what I mean? Or like go to some ones that are in the case study that you'd have the expectation that it would be mobile optimized, and not designers trying to code, or obviously Webflow is big, Notion's big. There's other things that come out of the box, but yeah, good. So moving on to Dian Chang. So some of the goals of portfolio. Well, it looks like she was working on this over the weekend. I guess just working on finish showing a process for each. potentially getting some short-term contract work, and for goals or feedback, what should she be showing in her process? How can she make herself even more appealing as a contractor?
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't see the kind of context around the images, so I was going to say it'd be great to have some more information about what it is, but then Andrew scrolled down.
I think overall, pretty clean layout. I mean, good to see other companies that you've designed for.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
That people can recognize. Yeah, let's see what else. So UI, UX, UI designer. I don't know if that means product designer. I know there's a lot of titles going around. I might consider that, like, hey, if you're kind of doing research and design, like, and visual design, might be both. But yeah, good. I think overall, the covers are helpful here to show, hey, what was the actual human-facing goal of this? I think that's always good to reframe the problem versus, hey, redesign an app. How do we help travelers budget time to board their flight stress-free? Yeah, so I think.
Yeah, I think here the solution's really helpful. I'd love a little bit more background on the process, and I really like these visuals. I think this is really great. You use some really clean, fun, nice mock-ups. But I'd also love just a little bit more in terms of your process, kind of what the problem was and kind of how you got here to these screens, and different things like that. Just in terms of, again, just think about sketches or mood boards or any other kind of research for the process, and then any kind of potential like outcomes or impacts.
Yeah, I think this is helpful. I think like highlighting this more, the design has some really simple elements, I think, which could be kind of blown up a bit. But I think as you get to the state of some of these items, I think it'd be interesting to see the same sort of component but in different states, like showing some of those side by side. I think really helps think through like or like showcase your interaction design and like how does this item change state over time as a user interacts with it or as the status of it changes. So more of that like component level decision making, I think, would be really helpful. Overall, I think, yeah, super clean.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Katie said, if I was a business looking at you to hire as a contractor, like my first question would be like, well, how can you help me solve my problems? Or like, how do you solve a problem to even know that you'd be able to solve my problem, right? Like, I think not having that problem space really is sometimes difficult to understand as a person. Like, how do I know what is their thought process? How would they help me solve my problem? Especially if I'm trying to hire you as bringing you as a contractor. I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to understand, like, how do you help me solve my problem?
Yeah, it'd be good to also understand. So here, like Client Expedia, I don't know if you could put their logo, but that would hold a pretty good amount of weight if people saw that. So just having more of those logos up top, maybe that would kind of entice people to continue on. And then available for short-term contract work. Like how can you help people identify as like, oh, Diane can help me. She's helped people just like me before. How could you put some statements here that help target, help people decide yes or no if you're the right fit for them, or if whether or not they should continue on.
Yeah, definitely highlighting that and bringing that out, kind of overview, just to help situate someone just kind of going through this really quick.
Also, too, I would maybe, if you have any work for like web, I know it's fairly mobile focused, it looks like. So again, sometimes not having that web experience may eliminate you, especially from a lot of the enterprise side of things. It's really focused on web for the enterprise side. So are you eliminating yourself from some of those projects? Have you done any projects that are on web? Just to show your depth of like design, it's really app focused, it looks like right now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, this is good to know.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would think about positioning a little bit more. It seems like you've done quite a bit in the activities and travel space. It might be you know, a good niche for you to niche down into. But you're making digital product or service. I think that's a lot of people. So maybe trying to get a little bit more focus would help you know, people select in. But yeah, this is helpful. Things that you've designed, you know, kind of answering Alex's. So getting some of these services up on the front in some way might be helpful.
I like the different ways so you can get in touch too, like scheduling a call or email or even phone number. It's just always helpful to be versatile where anyone's at any kind of functioning. If someone doesn't have access to email right there, they can text you. It's interesting.
Yeah. Overall, I mean, looks really good. Yeah. Good job. We have next up here, we have Dorte Peterson from Denmark. Oh. There you go. Next, it wasn't clear to me that I should go over, but I haven't used Adobe in a while, so.
Oh yeah, this is on Adobe, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think these recaps are helpful. You know, it'd be good to understand more, kind of along with our other feedback. You know, feedbacks for improvements or what's missing is what Dorte is looking for. So I think, you know, more of the process behind it, or more of the, you know, some of the project goals, I think would be really helpful, depending on what, you know, what you're looking for, you know, in a job. You know, you're looking to do more, you know, more research work or more design, you know, visual design work, interaction, or really full product design. It'd be good to just see more of the thought process and the steps.
And even here, you know, I'd love to see more of these kind of artifacts, visual images of the work and everything like that. And again, the process would always be helpful. But even if you're limited to, you know, just one view, like I know like this one is kind of helpful because you're able to zoom in, but like even with this website, the Copenhagen Baby Heart Study, like it's really hard for me to read it. You know, I think you'd have to be like on a larger desktop and kind of zoom in and stuff. So just maybe thinking about pulling out like larger screenshots of that information to kind of be able to focus on that. If you're able to only show one visual would be, I think, helpful.
And
Yeah,
so
I
you
don't know
sort of
if
think
these
about
are
like, I
supposed
know.
to link to that. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just thinking about somebody, you know, this is another great case for like maybe having it in Notion, right? Like Katie said, it's hard to zoom in on some of this stuff. Like Notion, that might provide a way for you to have that same kind of contextual side of it. But, you know, putting some visuals into a Notion, that might be able to be easier to zoom in on it, or just get more in depth into that a little bit more. That might be a good tip too.
Yeah. So move on to Hiraki Takashita. So the goal is to get feedback on layout and storytelling, and yeah, design, storytelling, and the format. I think it'd be good to add a little bit of context on, you know, product designer that does, you know, mobile, web, you know, maybe just building upon this statement a little bit. I know as designers, we tend to be very minimalist focused, where we might, you know, we create portfolios to impress other designers, but not necessarily attract clients. So I think it really depends on what your goal is. But I think this is clean overall. I like, you know, the visuals of this. Yeah, it looks really clean. clean experience. Kind of, it makes sense why your portfolio is so minimal as well.
Yeah, great background. I like the little Q&A section. Just a little bit more personalization to it that I'd even like to see at the front page. But that's still, again, helpful to see who, the kind of person behind the design is, which is always valuable, and have that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. From we'll go back to the work perspective. This presentation's nice. I like using, these placed images is helpful just to kind of see it in a device. I know. I'm sorry, just looking. Yeah, role, duration, challenge. Yeah, it's helpful to get these recaps, these kind of big stats up front.
The other thing too, I was interested in, it says our client. I was wondering like what other people played roles in this. I think that's something too. If you scroll up, like, is it more of like ours, meaning just like when you say our like that way, it just makes me feel like, okay, what other people on the team? Like what roles did you play in that compared to? I'm not sure if that was answered above because it says
our client. Oh, our client was
yeah.
Raiser.
Yeah, so I'm just understanding like was it more than just you? Was it more just so I can understand if there is more people, like what were you responsible for compared to somebody else? Yeah, so it's one of 3 designers.
Yeah, focus on business and design strategy and
There it is,
user
yeah.
research.
Yeah, I even like the highlight, like how they implement the share leadership strategy and empower each team member's strength. I would love to even know like a little bit more about that, like team member strengths, like your strengths, and like kind of how you helped implement that would always be really valuable to see how you're working with the team, not just in a project, but like what you're solving for, but even just together in collaboration.
Yeah. I think this is super helpful, kind of a big, big call out statement with more of the visual design, I think, which is helpful to see. One thing might be, and I don't know if it's my monitor, or if it's just the image that's rendering, but just seeing that a little bit crisper, I think would be helpful. I think it's scaling the image. Oh, it's multiple images kind of wrapped in there, so it makes sense. Seeing this up front, I think would be helpful. What's the process you went through, and then linking down here.
I was actually just going to say that I like how you kind of showed like the actual outcome up front, and then like are diving in step by step of what that process was, and just kind of telling a story, highlighting it, like we're like, this is part of discover, this is part of find. And I even like how that top bar like sticks and helps guide you through it to remember like where you're at, and then what kind of category that's under. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, I think overall the presentation, the layout, storytelling is good. Yeah, it makes sense. It's clear, concise. More of my work, kind of encouraging people to continue.
Yeah, I do like how you can just easily like link to the next project at the bottom versus having to like go back. It makes people it would definitely make me want to just keep going through project after project. So I think that's a valuable thing to have everyone who comes to your site and is looking at your work, being able to flow and easily access every project and kind of keep them interested to see all your work.
Yeah, looks like maybe bringing back the nav here, looks like you might be on 2 different kind of build, one that's driving some of the projects and then one that's driving some of this work. So I think kind of bringing it all back together, I think would be helpful, just to kind of encourage about contact resume, because you can't really, I don't think you can access from this page, maybe at the bottom. Yeah, I guess a little bit here. overall, I think, yeah, it goes in, if you're looking, if it's somebody who's looking at your portfolio, either, coming from an application or was, you were referred to, I think it gives them enough meat to continue diving in and learn more about specific projects and the ins and outs of, what you did and some of your process there. So I think it's super helpful. I don't think it's too much that it overwhelms, and this helps. So from a time perspective, we are at 7:30. There's a couple other questions. So I think we're going to switch to that. So one of the questions from Nabil: how do you approach evaluating portfolios that include a mix of projects, product, graphic, branding, and more? What's your opinion on designers showcasing their other practices in their portfolios?
So for me, I think, I don't have a right or wrong. I know before I started out, when I was kind of starting out in graphic design, I actually did a lot of different printmaking. So I did like screen printing and lithography. And even though it's an art, it's a media form, I was kind of confused at first on if I should add those kind of pieces into my portfolio with more of my classic design, web work and things like that. And I know for me, I think it's valuable. I would say that if you are going to add something that's more outside of kind of what your focus is and what you're like the job you're going for, I would caution you to add maybe only one or two of those kind of projects or kind of those illustrative examples, because mostly kind of what you're going for, if they're not completely correlated into kind of what you want to do, and potentially anyone checking out your work to hire you is going to be necessarily going after. However, if it does somewhat fall under, if you're going for a role that involves something of your kind of personal work or your kind of other thing outside of that, I would definitely recommend showing that. But then also, if you want to include one example, even if it doesn't, I think that's still valuable and kind of showing your skill range and what other interests you have just as a person, which is helpful.
Yeah, I would second that. I think one of the things we look for is making sure that you're going to be fulfilled at Headway, that if you're looking for a lot of like branding work or illustration work, there's not a whole lot of opportunities here for that. So I think just being honest about like what type of work you're going for and ultimately would like to do, I think is helpful, so that you can get the right job where you feel like you're flexing the right muscles that you want to focus on. So I think just echoing what Katie said. There was another note here from Alicia, sorry. Do you have some advice on how to tackle situations where different projects have gaps based on constraints? For example, one project was more of a front-end web development project, so designs and iterations were mainly just whiteboard sketches and then straight to development, versus her involvement in another project that was more heavily research focused and didn't actually do much of the high fidelity designs or implementation. I think in that case, definitely saying what the challenge is and even identifying those constraints. Hey, we had, 2 sprints or 4 weeks to do this, and so here's the things we passed up. I think showing some of that decision making is helpful, and sometimes even saying like, hey, the constraints were imposed by either a manager or a project team, or we needed to get live for this event, and here's how we solved for that. I think that can show a little bit of the creativity and flavor and like where you're seeing value in prioritizing how you can add the most value to those projects. So I think just calling that out, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, and just to add to, oh, sorry, Alex. Just to add to kind of Andrew's point, again, just being able to call that out, even though I know you said you might have done a lot of the high fidelity work, or any kind of situation, you might focus on one part of that design or one part of that process versus others. So again, just calling that out, and then even showing that work, even if you didn't do a lot of work on the high fidelity, I still think it's valuable, and just again being able to be upfront and note that. But it's still valuable to see that work and that outcome of what was kind of reached.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, that actually is, I think, also a benefit too, because it shows you a couple things. One, it shows your depth of abilities, right? Like you can do front end this, it shows the skills that you bring, not just design, but other skills that you can bring to the table as a possible hire, or as well as also the side part is, constraints are real world things. sometimes projects are showing like all the happy spaces of them, like, oh, this is all great, this has all happened, this is great stuff. But in the real world, that's not the truth. A lot of times there's a lot of constraints that all of a sudden come out of the blue. Hey, like this project got cut short and now we have to have this done now. Right? Like, so there's things that are going to happen. And I think that shows the ability to adjust and work on the fly and change what you can do or can't do, and understanding that because of constraints. So I think that's a good thing to show. Just shows your flexibility as well.
Yeah, another question here on student work versus hypothetical projects. So I've heard mixed feedback around hiring managers view student work and whether or not it should be super obvious when it's student work. For example, if you do a feature redesign for an existing app or product, what's your recommendation for being honest that it's hypothetical project? Where should we call it out and how? I think, yeah, you should be honest. I don't know. Go ahead, Alex.
No, as I say, I think, it's one of those things that it depends on what level of entry you're looking at, right? Like if you're looking for an entry level, like if it's an entry level role, obviously it's going to be hard to have real world projects because it's entry level. You're just getting into it, right? But making sure you do call it out and saying this is, student work. But I think most of the time, if you're maybe a hiring manager or myself, like you'll be able to correlate, like, is their resume saying that they worked for Airbnb, right? Or is it like, okay, they have an Airbnb project? Well, you can kind of tell, right? Like you can tell it's student, but you don't want to like hide it. But I think it all depends. Now, if you're going for a senior role and you still have student work on there may be a bigger concern, right? Like, why is there student work on here where we're, having for a senior position and you really are entry level, you're showing any entry level work kind of thing. So I think that's, but to echo what Andrew was starting to say is like, just you need to be obvious and upfront about it. If it is student work, don't be afraid to say it. Tell them why it was there, and it's just still showing your process.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I know for me, I'm supportive of student work or kind of more fictional personal projects. But I would just caution and limit if you do have them on there, even if you're exploring like an Airbnb redesign for fun. I think it's valuable in what you can do, but I would again call those out as Alex and Andrew said, and I would try to limit those and not make that the majority of your work. Because I know, client work can be, I think it's good, but I do agree that client work is always somewhat a little bit more challenging because you're encountering different, things that come up at different points. So just kind of having to kind of redirect at different times versus on a hypothetical or student work where it's I guess it's a short term or it's more of like your personal understanding.
Yeah, I think part of that is being able to label out the work, but then let's say you had an idea for how you could make Tesla's in-car UI better, and you made and it was purely a visual exercise and it was a proof of concept, and it showed kind of some foresight on interaction design and how people interact with vehicles. Like if somebody did that as a senior, I would be like, hey, that's really cool. They thought through these problems, the situations, the environment. If somebody that was applying was senior and they just did a visual redesign of Airbnb just because, I think that would carry less weight. So I'd almost rather see somebody try to pursue launching their own startup idea or product idea and then show the journey that they took on who they interviewed, what the process was like, because in those cases where you don't have work, you can control every step of the process because you are the client in that case. And for me, in my early days, that's how I learned. It was just by starting our own apps, our own startups, our things that we wanted to launch, and just learned like what worked, what didn't. And then, as obviously got experience, learn more about frameworks and things that you can do, things that we use today. But I would say if you can make it real, even if it is just for you and it's an idea you want to pursue, I think there's more meaning behind that. I think that's, super helpful. Another question here from Jimmy Tran. What advice do you have for displaying work that's focused on upstream strategy work where the visuals aren't as attractive as downstream UX UI work before a product or service enters the market? I think showing the artifacts, a lot of times that's how you get buy-in. I think also showing the journey of kind of how your assumptions changed over time as you gathered more feedback, as you interviewed more users. I think the evolution is really important rather than just like, hey, here's the outcome. So it still is the process to get to that, and maybe what what insights you ultimately gathered, but how did your assumptions change over time as you did more of that strategy work? I would be interested in.
Yeah, I know for me, just to add on to that too, there's times where, I know that kind of that upstream work can be a little bit less visually appealing. But I still think like, even if you come away with, a journey map, like don't ever be afraid to kind of take that journey map and almost like, kind of like revisualize it or kind of explore more in terms of data visualization, or even again, like I know today we saw some of, how to take that research that's a little bit more monotonous and, pull out those kind of numbers, pull out those kind of quotes. So you can even do that. Just kind of think about, how you can visually make something appealing. Like think about if you were like, did this project and you're like, this is what I have, but I need to, put up a billboard or something like to sell it. Just try to think about, how to just to level that up a little bit further is always, I think, a helpful thing.
Yeah, and to same thing, just a reference, like I was on a project that we had to do a lot of that upstream, artifacts, right? Like there's days that's what your work is, right? And it's also still designing in a sense that you're being able to take that data, digest it, and like present it in a visual way that can still be conceptualized and understood. And I still think that shows the design side of you, the person inside of you. It's not always about what it's going to be like the app or the website, right? It's still taking that context and having it be digestible and understandable. So I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like people are so used to just seeing the visuals of like an app or a website, but I think that still does have a lot of great value, because you are, as a person, you work with a client, you're going to have to start to share your journey and why, or how you've come to these solutions or these findings, and still display that and educate them in a visual manner. So I still think those are important pieces that you do need to have as well, and you can share.
Another question here from Daniel. How would you recommend finding projects to put on a portfolio as someone just entering the industry? I think reaching out to people. I think, there's a difference between internships and apprenticeships, and I know there's some companies that do that kind of more continuously. We have one that we don't, it's not active right now. I think that, like, creating your own projects. If you are going to do a redesign of Airbnb, it'd be great to see like you actually doing research and actually reaching out to people. Hey, I know, some Airbnb hosts, and I know people that have traveled Airbnb, and really uncovering some more insights that can then arm you when you get to the visual redesign in the process. So I think, creating your own ideas is always helpful. Things that you wish existed, even if those are visual designs, doing the research to be able to do that, reaching out to people. There's job boards, like Dribbble has a job board now for freelancers where people post, all kinds of jobs for different, not jobs, projects rather. They have a project board for apps, for websites, for logos, things that people are needing from a design perspective. So I think looking there, looking into, like there's always startups, startup weekends. There's always startups, and founders looking for people to help bring their ideas to the next level. So I think if you can find someone that's passionate about a specific problem, and you can partner with them to bring and learn design by, really going through those iterations, I think that's a really good way. I don't know, Alex and Katie, if you have any other.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I think that was really helpful, Andrew. I know for me too, just to add, when I started off, I had a lot of, I guess you could say, more personal or school projects entering the industry. And then I had like a couple like short-term or small freelance projects. So I know like I was kind of trying to like weigh and figure out how to like get more projects and get more out there and not just like, apply for a job or anything like that. But I know like one thing too is I would just say definitely don't be afraid to, connect with people and collaborate in the design industry. Like, thank goodness for Dribbble. Like, I think Dribbble is a great tool to connect with designers. Like, definitely don't be afraid to like reach out and email designers. I know like when I was fresh out of school, I just started emailing, like pretty big designers that I was like admiring on Dribbble, and a lot of them actually responded back to me, and like I actually created like some friendships and got some recommendations, and even don't be afraid to go out there and like and explore projects and get connections. Like I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with like Lost Type, but I've ended like a Lost Type font when that was kind of like a design thing. And if you just make those connections in the design world, I think those transfer over to more of like potential projects that you can be a part of. Whether people reach out to you for jobs or like other people or other designers like, hey, I'm part of this project, we're looking for a fellow designer, anything like that. I think just again, just making those connections can actually lead you down a road or a road in the future where it'll kind of come back and help build those projects up.
And I think too, just to echo, once, we get back to normalcy a little bit here eventually in, the world, that, going to events and going to like UX meetups and just being around the people and hear them talk. And if they're talking about projects they're working on, like just, even have a way to present some of your work or your thoughts on something, that's a great way too, just to join these communities. And, even Slack is there's a ton of different design UX Slack channels that you can be a part of. And I know you can ask questions and people are usually pretty receptive for that. So just look for that too, like look for other communities to be involved in, to like, not even if it's just a local, like here in Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin UX, like look for different like Northeast regions or just like general like bigger UX communities, and just see how the conversations are going and talk to them. Because sometimes a lot of people say, hey, I have a hackathon project or something I could use some design work on, right? Like there's a great example of time for you just to volunteer your time to go there and help out. So yeah.
Good. Looks like we have one more question. Tania, sorry if I butchered the name. What are the top 3 skills hiring managers look for in a product design portfolio? The top 3 skills, I think combining research with visual design and like product process, like familiarity with kind of the journey to get to those insights, I think is what I look for. I guess what we look for in portfolios, like melding those 3 things together is really helpful. Perfect. Well, that is all we have for today. If your portfolio didn't get reviewed, I think we're going to do amongst the team here, we're going to do some portfolio reviews probably a little bit later this week and send out some Loom videos to everybody that's sent. We have about 10 or 12 left. So if your portfolio didn't get reviewed, we'll want to make sure that you get some feedback. And if you had questions about today or insights, things you disagreed with, would love to chat about your perspectives and learn more about that. But really appreciate everyone's time and everyone's willingness to share their portfolios to chat through. And hopefully it was helpful for a lot of people that are looking for jobs in this time. And if we can be a sounding board as you job hunt, feel free to email us and connect with us, and stay tuned to the community here. Jacob, anything before we drop off that would be helpful?
No, I can't really think of too much. Just thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to like answer all these questions and get some more feedback from you and what you're thinking about when you're putting together your portfolios. This video will be recorded and up on YouTube tomorrow. And then obviously, since you registered for this event, we'll send you an email with a link to that and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously, like I just said, we'll follow up with you if we didn't get a chance to review your portfolio. We're currently planning for more events for next month and through the summer. We do events almost every month for Wisconsin UX, and we also have a front-end development event that we do called React.js Green Bay, and we're planning for that for next month as well. So yeah, we'll be in touch. Feel free to follow us on YouTube, find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Headway.io is our handle, and hopefully to look forward to connect with you in the future. So thanks.
Smash that like button.
Yeah.
Smash it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Everyone.